Hi there, I'm going to show you how you can create a patch pocket, which is something like this that you'd find on a shirt, or you might find on the back of jeans, such as this one which I've cut off. They can be different shapes. They could be just rectangular, they could have angled corners, they could be curved, or they can have additional stitching on there for a little bit of embellishment. I'm going to keep this sample straightforward, and we're just going to make a sample of a rectangular patch pocket that you could apply to whatever garment you like. If you're on one of my courses, you will have been given this pattern piece, which you'll need to cut out along the bold lines, and then you'll have this, and then you'll need to cut that out from fabric. So you need to cut out your patch pocket, and then where the fold line is marked, I've just put a tiny snip of about 1/2 centimetre in each end to mark where that line needs to be folded. So I've got a little snip at each edge. The first stage to creating the patch pocket is to turn the pocket to the wrong side, so turn it over so the wrong side's facing, and then just turn the top edge over by 1/2 centimetre and then iron that in place. I'm then going to stitch that so that it's fixed, stitching quite close to that raw edge, or aiming for the centre if you're worried you're going to slip off the edge. So that's my pocket stitched, and then I will turn it back to the right side and fold it along the fold line. You don't want to press along the fold line because it's going to be turned the other way, so just turn that in place, and then you can pin that in place at either edge. My next stage is to machine stitch all the way around the pocket. So I'm going to start from the top edge, and I'll stitch in 1.5 centimetres because that's the seam allowance on my pocket. So stitching from here down to the corner, pivoting across the bottom, pivoting and across the top. Now if you want to make sure you're going to pivot in the right place on the wrong side of the fabric, you can mark where the seam allowance is. So on here you can just use a ruler and measure in 1.5 centimetres and put a mark, and measure in from the other side 1.5 centimetres and mark that, and do the same on this side, so you can have the exact measurements so that you know exactly where you need to pivot. And if you want to, you can then draw those lines in. So this is the bit where I've stitched. So I've stitched 1.5 centimetres in all the way around, and my next stage is to trim away some of the excess seam allowance, because this edge is then going to be turned under, and it can be quite bulky if you've got lots of excess fabric that you're turning under. So I'm going to cut away about half all the way around, and then cut away just a little bit of the corners here to reduce the bulk at this top edge. So this is like the mid-cutting stage, so as you can see I'm cutting away about half of that all the way around. And then this is the finished cut. So I've cut the corners here and here, not cutting too close to the stitches. I have got a few millimetres here before I've cut away on that corner, and then I've cut all the way around, leaving these corners as they are. Then what I will do is turn this pocket edge to the right side, and I've got a handy little tool for turning point, so point turner tool. You could use a pair of scissors or you can use a ruler, but just be really careful that you're not pushing that tool or the scissors through your corner and making a hole, else you'll have to start again. So I can just use that point to just poke out the corner there, and to do the same here. What I find is sometimes a good idea to help when you're turning that corner is to just fold the edge in before you turn and then that might help you to get a better corner. And then all the way along the edges of the pocket, I'm going to just turn that edge in so that the stitching is visible from the wrong side, from the underneath. So I'm using this stitch line as a guide, and I'm going to just turn that in and press that all the way around, turning along my stitch line and turning it just slightly beyond the stitch line so that from the right side you don't see those stitches. You might find at the corners it's a bit tricky to try and get that to stay folded to the inside, but with a little bit of patience you can make sure that that corner is turned inside and will stay in place and won't be visible on the outside when this is sewn on. I'm going to press the top of the pocket flat, and then what I will do is from the right side of the fabric I'm going to just stitch about 2 centimeters from the top edge here. I'm going to stitch all the way along there. So really I'm following almost the stitch line that's here, but I stitch from the right side and make sure that that's straight, because sometimes I find once I've done all my pressing that this line doesn't always look as straight as it should do. So stitch from the right side, as I said, about 2 centimeters from the raw edge, just to hold that in place. So you're going to have something like this. So you can see my visible stitch line on the right side of the fabric, and then you can see that I've turned in the raw edge all the way around, so there's no visible stitching from the right side. What you'll need to do next is to get yourself another piece of fabric or your garment, and then this can be sewn onto your garment. So I'm just going to use a piece of calico, as this is just a sample piece, and then I can just position that central-ish onto the calico and I can pin that in place. And then I'm going to stitch the pocket quite close to the edge, so edge stitching all the way around, back up to the top again. But what I like to do to make sure that the pocket top edge is fixed and won't come undone with sort of regular use is to put in some sort of reinforcing stitches around the top edge. And if you have a look at these pockets that I've got here, you can see on the jeans pocket that it's actually stitched twice, so you could stitch twice. You could also add some embellishing stitches before you put the pocket on if you want to, and they also use a zigzag here to kind of secure the top edge. So that's the technique that's used in jeans that are made in the factory. Obviously if you're working at home you might find it hard to sort of stitch in this way on your domestic sewing machine. On the other patch pocket I've got here, this is stitched in a rectangle at the top, or sometimes you might see that it's stitched as a triangle. So on this shirt that I've got here, this is actually stitched as a triangle at the top. So you can use different techniques, but what you want to try and have is some kind of reinforcement stitching at the top. What I'm going to do on mine is I'm going to start at the edge here, and then I'm going to follow for about 3 stitches, or about ½ centimetre, follow in the line of stitching that's already there, and then stitch up to the top, pivot, stitch across to the top corner, and then stitch all the way down. So I'll be stitching a rectangle in this corner and then edge stitching all the way around the pocket, and when I get to the top corner here, stitching across and down and along that line of stitches. So I've created another rectangle up there. So what you want to make sure is that your rectangles on both sides are the same size. So you can either do that by measuring, or do it by eye, or by counting how many stitches you've made across the fabric. So once that's done, you'll have something that looks like this. So you can see on my pocket I've got my rectangles in the corners and I've stitched all the way around, so that pocket is now secured. So that's the sample of the patch pocket. There are other ways in which you can form the patch pocket. You could mitre the bottom corner and get yourself a perfectly stitched bottom corner, and I've also seen examples where you can use a pocket template and iron over the pocket template, but this is one method that you can use at home.